Giving arguments is a part of human life. And justifying our views is a necessary part of our communication with others, pushing forth certain social and economic policy. If we want to be rational people, if we care about consistency and being right and saying true things and living the truth, we got to know about the stuff that we're looking at today. So, in our first unit here, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the nature of arguments, we're going to look at logical fallacies, and we're going to contrast that stuff with what we might call rhetoric. Today, we're starting with the basics, the fundamentals, the nature of logical arguments. So let's begin. Can anybody tell me what they think an argument is? Yeah. A disagreement? Yes, that's one definition, right? If you're having an argument with someone, you're normally disagreeing about something. How about like a more formal definition? It's the expression of what you might call an opinion. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about it that's meant to persuade, right? You don't give an argument for no reason. You give an argument because you're providing some sort of justification or reasons for accepting some view, right? Yeah. If you're having an argument with someone, yeah, there's going to be an exchange there. More formally, we could say an argument is a series of statements that are meant to support some sort of view or conclusion. Okay? So, the authors say, an argument can be defined as a series of statements, one of which is the conclusion, the thing argued for, and the others are the premises, the reasons for accepting the conclusion. So, I've summarized that here as follows. All arguments are composed of statements, that's the first part, that are either true or false, which provide reasons for some proposition or claim. Okay? These are three important parts of an argument. And then we can break it down further and say also an argument needs to have premises and a conclusion, but we'll get there. So, the first thing, what is a statement? Can you give me an example of a statement? Is this a statement? No, why not? It's just not. Yeah? A declaration? Yeah. Yeah, what does a declaration do?
It tells what you are trying to convey to the audience.
Yeah. If we wanted to say something circular, we could say a declaration declares something, but that doesn't really help, right? Were you going to say something, Oliver?
It states something.
It states something. Yeah, what does that mean? Well, yeah. An expression of something in verbal or nonverbal form. Yes. And there's another property to that as well. See, we can distinguish in our language between what we might call statements and other sentences. Okay? Not all sentences are statements. If you read in writing, that's a sentence, right? That would be a complete sentence in a novel, but it's not a statement, right? So we use different kind of sentences to express things, but they have different properties. Okay? Arguments are a series of sentences. A series of sentences which are either true or false. That's what a statement is. We could define it as a true or false sentence. It says something about yourself, or about the world, or about the state of things. it's true or false. It has what we would call a truth value. That's what a statement is. So, this is a table. That's a statement. My hair is green. That's a statement. It's a false statement, right? This room is hot. That's a statement. Might be a little bit more difficult to figure out whether it's true or false, though. Maybe there's something subjective going on there. But arguments contain true or false sentences. Okay? They're true or false. We might compare this with what we would call a confession. This is a particular kind of statement. The statement that you make about yourself, right? Or about something that you did. So it's self-referential in that respect. We might contrast this with an explanation. An explanation is a sentence about, well, how something works, right? Like charges repel. Dissimilar charges attract, right? That is an explanation about how charged particles work in physics. And we might distinguish this further from a description, which we might call a sentence about what something is like. So, in our language, we use sentences of all different kinds. Arguments are a particular series of sentences, and more specifically, they're statements. They say something that is either true or false. So when you have an argument, you'll have premises and a conclusion. The premises and the conclusion, they'll all have a truth value. They'll either be true or false. Okay? So, that's not an argument. Right? That would be something else. It would just be a series of visceral, guttural noises. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So the first part's important. An argument is a series of statements. You can separate an argument into different parts. I've already told you about this. All arguments have what are called premises and at least one conclusion. For example, can somebody give me an argument? There's one that's used a lot in philosophy. I wonder if you've heard of it. Or it could be anything. Give me an argument for something. How about this? This mug is purple. All mugs that are purple are cool. So this mug is cool. That's an argument, right? You might not agree with it, but it's an argument nonetheless. It has two premises and it has a conclusion. All arguments have these parts. How about this one? All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. This would also be an argument, right? 1 and 2 are the premises. 3 is the conclusion. The thing that is being argued for, and these are given in support of it, right? And if you interrogate that argument, you'll see that it is true, and it also has some other special properties as well that we're going to get into in this class. I know this is rather basic, but does it make sense? Great, thank you. So, arguments are statements that are true or false. They have other properties as well. And they're driving at something. They're providing support for something, a view or a claim. Any questions so far? Just keep it back there for a second. I'll collect it later. In life, we give all kinds of arguments. Maybe you provide arguments to your roommates for why they should clean their room. Maybe your parents provide you arguments for why you should go to this college and not that one. Politicians will provide arguments for why people should support the bill that they're trying to pass. Right? Providing arguments is how we do things in human life. It's how we can get shit done. All arguments have premises and a conclusion, but there are a lot of different kinds of premises. We might first distinguish the different kinds of premises by talking about empirical ones. What do you think an empirical premise is? Have you heard this word, empirical?
Something that's very true and cannot particularly be proven.
Maybe. That's not how I would define it, but maybe. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. An empirical premise is some sort of observation. It's some sort of reference to what you see, taste, smell, feel. It's some sort of, claim about an observation that you have. It's based on the five senses. This is where we get the word empiricism from. Empirical. If you know anything about philosophy, empiricism is the view that the way that we obtain knowledge of the world is primarily through experience, the five senses. You don't need to know that, but it's helpful. So, it is cold outside. I was outside earlier. If that statement was in an argument, that would be an empirical premise because I felt it and now I'm reporting on it, right? Or it is not raining outside. That's an empirical premise. Or I feel a table underneath me. That's an empirical premise, right? I'm reporting on some sort of observation or experience that I've had. And we can express these in a bunch of different ways, right? I can see that it is raining outside. I can see that you are captivated by the lecture. I wish. I heard the noise coming from upstairs. I saw him run away with my own eyes. So he's guilty of the crime. Right? These are all empirical premises. I felt him touch my butt. Yeah, that's another empirical premise, right? Some sort of report of your experience, of your observation. Okay? And it's tied to what we would call the five sense organs. What we see, smell, taste, touch. What's the other one? Ear. Making sense?
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Keep doing that. If you don't understand something, tell me that as well, okay? So there are empirical premises. But these aren't the only premises that we use in an argument. Duh. We also use definitions in arguments, right? What would a definitional premise be? Could you give an example? Or could you tell me what a definitional premise is? Use your logic and reasoning skills. If an empirical premise is one based on observation, a definitional premise is based on what? A definition? Yeah, you might call it a fact. Yeah, you're talking about something like the necessary and sufficient conditions for what a thing is. The way that I've summarized it here is its premises based on how a word is used or what a word means. We have definitions in our language that are supposed to provide for us information about what a word means, what it refers to, how it's supposed to be used, right? If you have a premise that's based on that stuff, it's definitional. For example, a triangle has three sides. We're not trying to make an empirical observation here. We're talking about the essence of a triangle, right? What the word triangle means. It's a thing with three sides whose internal angles match up to 180 degrees, right? That's what it means for something to be a triangle. That is its definition. Okay? A pen is a writing instrument. Right? That's how we use the word pen. We're talking about something that you write with. That's what it means for something to be a pen. A cup is something that holds liquid. That's what it means for something to be a cup, right? That's how we use that word. Christians believe God exists. Can you be a Christian if you don't believe God exists? No, that's what it means to be a Christian, right? You believe that something exists that is called God. Now we could, argue about what exactly that means. It's a loaded word. But this is another way of saying what a Christian is, what the word Christian means, right? So there you go. It's fairly easy. We have empirical premises, definitional premises. Testimonial premises are similar to empirical premises, but they're a little bit different. What is a testimony? In court or otherwise? Yeah, it's like a recounting, or it's the expression of an experience, right? Something like that. It's like a report. That's what it means to give a testimony, is to give like a report. So a testimonial premise is one that is based on someone's report of something. For example, I saw on the news that it's raining. You're reporting what you saw on the news, right? What the news told you. Professor Gunner said that this lecture was going to be boring. If you said that to someone, you would be giving them a report, right? You would be giving a testimony of what I said, what you heard me say. Yes? My professor told me about arguments. There you go. You're testifying, you're providing a testimony of your experience. Or how about this? The expert said the drug was safe. There you go. The expert said something, and you're reporting that to somebody else. Testimony. Okay, so what are the three that we have so far? Three different kinds of premises. Empirical, definitional, testimonial. Empirical, based on your observation using the five senses. Definitional, based on what a word means or how it is used. Testimonial, giving a report of what you experienced, what you heard, what you saw, etc. Nowadays, a lot of the arguments that people give for things, especially if it's in the realm of politics, law, legal matters, social matters, economic matters, they'll provide testimonial premises. Because in our day and age, people lean a lot on what experts say, right? On the research that they engage in, on the things that they say in their papers, in their articles, on the presentations that they give. I mean, think of the last few years. How many arguments were given surrounding the whole COVID thing because some experts said it or didn't say it? People give all kinds of arguments for things based on expert testimony, on the information that an expert has relayed to the public. But there are a lot of things that we're going to want to consider before simply accepting someone's testimony. Okay? This is a logic and argument class. So the whole point is to teach you, is to give you the tools so that you can reflect on the premises and the conclusions and the arguments that you've been given and evaluate them for their truth, their validity, their soundness, whether or not you should trust them, whether or not you should lean on them. Okay? So, right out of the gate, there are a number of things that we should check when somebody tells us something. First of all, is what they're saying plausible? My weather app said it's going to get down to 18 degrees tonight. Is that plausible?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's plausible, right? Seems inside the realm of possibility. It's like what, 22 degrees right now? Yeah, that'll probably happen, right? How about this? My weather app said the sun is exploding and we'll all die in a minute. Is that plausible? Probably not, right? First of all, how would the weather app know that? How would I? No, that's not really plausible, right? Now, this one's a little tricky because whether or not something is going to seem plausible to you is going to be based on what you already know, your experiences, the frameworks, the biases, the worldviews that you bring to the table, right? For some people, if I said, my priest said that God exists, you're like, yeah, I think that's plausible. And other people would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're believing in myths, buddy. That's not plausible. So, a premise might be plausible to some, not plausible to others. But generally, I think we would all agree on the vast majority of premises if they're plausible or not. Because we have similar enough knowledge and life experience. So that's the first thing we're going to want to check for. Is what they're saying plausible? Could it happen? Has it happened before? Is it likely to happen? Based on what we know. Is the premise trustworthy? This one's a little tougher. Some people are more trusting than others. Some are less trusting than others. It's not obvious whether or not we should trust what somebody says, unless we know some things about that person. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Another question you might ask is there any way to test what the person has said? That might help you evaluate whether or not it's trustworthy. Can you test it? Does their argument or hypothesis make a prediction that can be compared against reality? So, plausibility, reliability, or is somebody just talking out of their ass? This becomes a lot more difficult, and we need to do a lot more work when we start incorporating the observations and the reports of others into our arguments. When we start thinking about the information that we're given from the news, the media, our educational system, government, so on and so forth. Right? We live in an age of experts. Everybody is an expert about something. And all these experts are always saying things. And sometimes they're contradicting one another. So how do you know if you can trust whether or not an expert is saying is true? How do you know? How can you figure it out? What considerations would you think about if you're trying to determine whether or not an expert says it's true? Anybody have any ideas?
Maybe they just have one place like trusted source of your own. Trust that source. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Proxy, you would then may trust.
It would provide you with another reason to trust what the expert is saying, right? If there's some kind of consensus, right? If you heard from your smart friend, oh yeah, I listen to this guy, I think he's right. You know, you're like, oh, okay, my friend's smart. Okay, yeah, that'll give you a reason to trust it more.
If he's an expert in the field of the thing he's talking about.
Right. Exactly. If I stood up here and I started talking about cell biology, would you trust what I was saying? You shouldn't, because I don't remember anything about cell biology, okay? I'm a philosophy professor. I took biology in high school. All right? And then I was a physics major, so I didn't have to take any biology classes. Now, if I was talking about physics, maybe you'd trust me a little bit more. But probably not biology or chemistry. What else?
I'd say they have a credential because they work with a company that is like trustworthy, I guess.
Credentials, yeah. You put it in terms of like, yeah, their occupation.
Yeah.
Right? Are they working for a reputable company? How about did they get a good education?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I'm making all these claims about cell biology, but I didn't go to school for cell biology, you don't think I've ever studied cell biology, you should think, well, I don't know about that. I don't know if he's ever done his research or done his biology readings. Right? He doesn't have a PhD in cell biology. Doesn't seem like he's friends with biology professors. I'm not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Life experience. Yeah. How long have they been perusing the information in that domain? Right? Have they done research? Have they just done light reading? Did they write a dissertation on the topic that they're talking about? Or are they just a layperson who's an internet troll? Who knows, right?
Food pyramid.
Yeah.
That has grains and bread as one of the biggest sources of macros you should eat a day. That I would say. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the restaurant said that was good, but really it is not.
Right.
It may not.
Right. Yeah, let's just assume that it's not good for you, okay? Yeah, I mean, what do you do? What do you think I'm going to try to push you to do in this class? Right. The project of science is ongoing. It's constantly collecting new data, hopefully updating its views. Hopefully experts are staying on top of the emerging research in the discipline that they're talking about. Yeah. How long ago did the information come out? Is there consensus? Has it been studied recently? Are there any new papers out on it? Yeah.
I was going to say,
Yes. Yes. You don't have all the time and energy in the world to research every little thing that you're told, right? You wouldn't be able to get anything done, okay? If you had to get to the bottom of everything, do your research about everything that everybody told you, you would die on the couch because you'd be researching until you starved. So there are some things that you need to trust just because we need to move through life and we need to work and we need to get our studies done. But you should be reflecting on what you're told. You should do research and investigate and explore those topics that are of interest to you. Yes, you should. I would encourage you to do that in this class. Because not everything that experts say is true, is it? Especially if they're talking in a realm outside of their own discipline, or if they have their own biases, or if there's a conflict of interest, or if they're being paid by somebody to say something, right? These are all things that you should consider when evaluating expert testimony. I think I have 5, 6 here that you're going to want to think about, at least. There are probably more than this. Does the person have the appropriate credentials? Did they study the thing that they're talking about? Did they go to school for it? Now, none of what I'm going to share with you is a knockdown, drag-out argument for what they're saying is true. That's why I say these are considerations, things that you need to think about. Because if somebody did go to school for cell biology, and they got a BA and an MA and a PhD in cell biology, that should give you more reason logically to accept what they're saying, probably, than somebody you just met off the street. But that doesn't mean that what they're saying is necessarily true. Okay? This is just providing you a reason to think that what they're saying is true. Okay? This is an important distinction. Have they been reliable in the past? Did they tend to be reliable? Did they say reliable things? Does anybody here have a friend who lies all the time? Can you trust anything that they say? No, you're just like, Mark, I'm not fucking trusting you. You lie all the time. You lie about dumb shit. I asked you what you had for dinner last night, and you're like mac and cheese, and you really ate a burger. What the hell is up with that? Right? Are they reliable? If you're looking at this in comparison with credentials, you might look at their publications. You might look at whether or not they express claims or hypotheses that have a good deal of evidence or not, that can be tested against reality or that cannot be. This kind of involves looking at the person's character, which is difficult to do in our world, given that we're being flooded with information all the time, and we don't know many of these experts that we're listening to personally. But it's something that you should be thinking about if you're trying to take what they're saying and accepting it as true. How about biases? Would you trust what a KKK Klan member has to say about the experiences of black people? Probably not, right? Should you? Probably not. They have some sort of bias there, right? It might not be racial. Biases come in all sorts of types and degrees, right? You can be biased about a certain group of people. You can be biased about a certain drug. You can be biased about a certain method for investigating the world. You could be biased about a certain workout regime or diet that you think is the best, right? So you're going to want to check to see if the person that you're listening to, do they have any biases? That might affect the information that they're relaying to you. That might color it. That might inform it in ways that, you should reflect on a little bit. Are they talking about something in their area of expertise? I keep bringing up a cell biology example. I'm a philosophy professor, and if I start talking to you again about cell biology, that probably gives you a reason to question whether or not what I'm saying is true. Now, if I'm talking about philosophy, something that I've been studying for 15 years, you'd be more likely to believe me, right? Because this is what I do. This is what I've been listening to. This is what I've been immersed in for a long time. So, does the person know what they're talking about? Are they well versed in it? Have they had experiences with it? Have they studied it? Or are they talking about something outside of their wheelhouse? Right? So you're going to want to check for that as well. Expert consensus is something that you're also going to want to check. If you have one scientist saying something, for example, tables are bad for you. Tables cause all these health problems. Tables are going to give you cancer. I'm sounding the alarm on tables. I'm a table expert. And all the other experts are like, what the hell is that guy talking about? No, tables aren't going to give you cancer. That might give you an indication that what the table expert is saying might not be true. So look to see if there is consensus regarding the claim that the person is expressing. Now, none of these things None of these things are going to tell you for certain whether or not what the person is saying is true. But these are things that you should be thinking about, that you should be exploring or investigating if you're trying to rationally approach whether or not you should trust someone and what they're saying. Another one you might ask is, do I know the person? Do I know what they're like? That's kind of associated with the reliability, right? Because it could be the case, like, look, somebody has the appropriate credentials, they seem reliable, you don't notice any biases, they are talking about something that they've studied, and there is consensus, but all these people could be wrong. That's always a possibility, okay? There's been a lot of change and evolution, for example, in health science, more specifically dietetics. Why? Well, one of the reasons is, if you look at a lot of the founding studies on which our diet science is based, they were all done on men. Now, is that missing something? Maybe, right? So that might cause you to look at that with a critical eye. So none of these, again, I need to hammer this home to you. Even if somebody passes all of this stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean what they're saying is true. It just means that you have good reason to think that what they're saying is true. Okay, but you could be mistaken in how you're evaluating the data. They could be mistaken. They could have overlooked something. It's possible for a large group of people to all be mistaken about something. If you're an atheist, you think that's what religious people are doing. If you're religious, you think that's what atheists are doing, right? And there are a lot of atheists, and there are a lot of religious people. Finally, you will also want to check if there are any conflicts of interest. For example, if I'm an independent scientist and I do a bunch of experiments, I'm a professor, let's say, I've studied drugs and pharmacology, and I do an independent experiment, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if this drug is safe. It doesn't look to be that safe. And then you have a scientist hired by Pfizer that says, this is totally safe. Is there a conflict of interest there? Well, if they're being paid by Pfizer, then yeah, they're likely going to say it's safe, right? They don't want to lose their job. They want to make that money. So, you always have to check if there are conflicts of interest too. Do I have some sort of interest in providing you with a mistaken view of the world? Is there a reason I might do that? Is there a reason media companies and news agencies might be interested in providing you with a particular narrative? These are questions that you should be asking. So, to reiterate, do they have the credentials that in our society pass for, yeah, that person probably knows what they're talking about? Do they have a reliable character? Do they have a history of being reliable, of being right? Do they have any biases that might be informing what they're saying? Are there any conflicts of interest here? Might they have an alternative reason to provide you with information other than just trying to tell you what's true? Are they talking about something in their area of expertise, something that they've studied, researched, spent time doing, engaging? And is there consensus on this point? These are all things that you should be thinking about when evaluating expert testimony. None of these, again, are going to tell you whether or not what they're saying is true. But they are considerations. All right, does that make sense? Okay. So we give arguments. A lot of these arguments are based on testimonial premises or expert testimony, right? or maybe it's an observation, or maybe we're providing a definition, it doesn't matter. There are better and worse arguments. Right? Some arguments are really shitty. For example, this ring is silver, my hair is brown, so the moon is made of cheese. That's an argument. Is that a good argument? Are those sentences, those statements connected in any way logically to each other? No, that would not be a good argument. How about the argument we looked at before? All humans are mortal. Socrates was a man, so Socrates was mortal. Is that a good argument? I think it's a good argument. We are pretty sure Socrates was a human being and not a god. And he did die. It's like everybody dies. Maybe that comes as a surprise to you. I don't know. Arguments can utilize basically one of two types of reasoning. We have deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Does anybody know the difference? Yeah? You want to take a stab at it?
I'll take a stab at it. Deductive would be a series of evidence allowing.
And that conclusion is what? True or false? Could be wrong. Could be wrong. If you're just looking at something, yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of. But there's something a little bit more formal going on here. When you have a deductive argument, the conclusion follows from the premises logically, if the premises are true, right? That's what it means to deduce something. You're basically following a chain of logic through to its conclusion. And you're like, okay, based on this, and based on this, if these things are true, this naturally follows from it. For example, that Socrates argument I gave before. If it's true that all humans are mortal, and if it's true that Socrates was a human, then it has to be true that Socrates was mortal. That would be a deductive argument. If the premises are true, the conclusion logically follows from it. We don't have to do any guesswork. We're just using our reasoning skills. But these are not the majority of arguments that people give. The majority of people do not give or interrogate deductive arguments, which are kind of mathematical in nature, right? There's a kind of certainty about them. For example, let's say we have this argument. All wars are started by miscalculation. The Iraq conflict was a war, so what's the conclusion? Well, if it's that, then it was started by a miscalculation. This might not necessarily be true, but if you have a deductive argument, you know that if these are true, then this has to be true. That's the property that we're looking at here. If the premises are true, the conclusion logically follows. The premises might be false. This might be false. Maybe not all wars are started by a miscalculation. In fact, probably a lot of them aren't. I don't know. I'm not a war historian. In contrast to deductive reasoning, in which the conclusion logically follows, when we have inductive reasoning, the conclusion is supported by the premises. This is different than logically follows, right? For example, let's take this image. I am supporting this water bottle. But, me holding the water bottle is not a necessary fact of existence. In other words, when you're using inductive reasoning, you're providing reasons for believing something, but that doesn't mean you're providing an argument such that the conclusion has to follow from the premises if they're true. It's just like, hey, I'm providing you reasons for something. For example, I saw the student run out of the room. He told me at the beginning of class he was feeling sick, so he's probably throwing up in the bathroom. That would be inductive reasoning, right? It doesn't have to be the case that he's throwing up in the bathroom. Maybe he got a call, right? But those facts, that I saw him run out of the room, that he told me he was sick, provide support for the idea that he's now throwing up in the bathroom because he ran out. Does that make sense? Or how about this? This would be an example of inductive reasoning as well. The sun has always risen every morning so far. Therefore, the sun will rise tomorrow. One premise, one conclusion. This provides support for this. But even if this premise is true, that doesn't mean that this has to be true, right? Maybe tonight, aliens enter our star system and blow up our sun. That's a possibility, right? Or maybe we find out that we're living in a simulation or something. So this provides support for the conclusion, but it doesn't prove it. Does that make sense? Okay, so deductive and inductive reasoning. These are associated with another way that we can characterize arguments, whether or not arguments are valid or invalid. This is what we would call a term of art in philosophy. It has a precise definition, a precise application. We throw these words around a lot in everyday life. Oh, that's valid. No, it's invalid, bro. But they have a precise definition in this area of study. Okay? And you might start getting upset at people because they're not actually saying something is valid when it is, and they're saying something is valid when it's not. So let's talk about that. Start being anal. Validity is associated with deductive reasoning. Basically, if you have a valid argument, it has the following property. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. That's a valid argument. That's what it means to say an argument is valid. For example, all men are mortal. That's true, so far as we know. Socrates is a man. That's true. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. True. He died. He drank the hemlock. He's gone. This would be an example of a valid argument. If these premises are true, this has to be true. And it turns out that these are true, so this is true. Make sense?
Yes.
So what do you think an invalid argument is?
I think either the premises are true or the conclusion is true, or the premises do not come to the conclusion, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. If you have an invalid argument, basically the premises could be true or false, and the conclusion could be true or false. There's no logical connection between these. These could be true and this could be false. These could be false and this could be true. That's an invalid argument. Just because the premises are true, if you have an invalid argument, that doesn't mean the conclusion has to be true. It could be false. For example, my mom and dad have brown hair. That is true. Just accept it. I'm telling you it's true. Trust me. My girlfriend also has brown hair. Therefore, our children will have brown hair. Is this a valid or invalid argument? exactly. Back when we took high school biology or whatever, right? Yes, exactly. These could be true, but this could be false, right? My kids could come out having red hair. There are a lot of different kinds of invalid arguments. This is one type where the premises are true and the conclusion is false. We could also have one in which the premises are false and the conclusion is true. I have blonde hair. The Timberwolves are the best NBA team. There's light outside. That would be an example of an invalid argument. But the conclusion is true, right? There's light outside. There it is. But the Timberwolves are not the best, and my hair is not blonde, right? And this one could be true and this one false. Or this one false or this one true, and this could be either. It would seem that the majority of the arguments that people give are inductive and probably invalid. But that doesn't necessarily mean what they're saying is wrong. This is an important point, okay? Just because an argument is valid or invalid doesn't tell you for certain whether or not their conclusion is true or false. Unless you know for a fact that they're using a valid argument and their premises are true. But it's hard to know that a lot of times. Okay? Our knowledge is limited. Our time is limited. These are ways to characterize arguments. If you want to support an idea, it would be a good idea to use a valid argument that relies on deductive reasoning. That would probably be the strongest form of argument. But you could be mistaken about one of your premises. Okay? So, for a valid argument, if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. It just follows logically. If one of the premises are false, though, that will probably lead you to believe that the conclusion is also false. But technically, the logical operation at work here is this top point. Valid arguments can have a false conclusion if the premises are false. Invalid arguments can be all over the place, like I said before. True premises, false conclusion, false premises, true conclusion, yada, yada, yada. All right. Are we good on this distinction? You understand the property of validity? Riveting, right? I know, you're loving it. It's great. What we care about, though, is truth, right? Knowledge, real knowledge. So it's not good enough to just use valid arguments. What we're going to try to do in this class is get to the bottom of things. We're going to read people's arguments. We're going to put forth arguments. We're going to talk about them. We're going to sift through them because we want to reach what's true. So, when we're evaluating these arguments, when you're evaluating other people's arguments, just keep in mind whether an argument is valid or invalid does not give you a proof that the conclusion is true. Unless you know for a fact that the premises are true and it's a valid argument. Okay? But again, very rarely do we know that. Almost any premise can be contested. For example, what color is my shirt? Maroon, red, yeah, whatever you want to call it. Are you sure about that? How do you know your eyes aren't deceiving you right now? Right? This is what philosophers do because they're terrible, confusing people. They love to inject a little doubt and question into everything. So what we're after is the truth. Validity or invalidity is no surefire proof of the truth of our beliefs. Okay? This is where we get to soundness. Soundness is another property of arguments. Soundness has to do with truth. An argument can be sound or unsound. There's a little sound wave, because I'm quirky like that. What it means for an argument to be sound is that it has two properties. It's valid and it's true. So what does that mean? It means its premises are true and its conclusion is true. That is a sound argument. For example, all dogs are mammals. All mammals give birth. Therefore, dogs give birth. If these are true, this has to be true just based on the logical structure of these sentences. Okay, so it's valid. And these premises are true, right? Are platypuses mammals? Maybe that's an exception. Maybe I should have used a different argument. I don't know. That's a weird one. Throw that out. Okay? This is sound. So, sound argument. Valid and true. So, what do you think an unsound argument is? Okay, so there's a lack of certainty.
Yeah, like if you...
Or a lack of proof?
Yeah, I guess, like if you compare it to, you can't really say definitively. I mean, well, you can't really say definitively which one's better because it's all based on opinion.
Okay. Unless we're going to use some objective metric that we both decide upon, I guess, or something. Which is, yeah. Yeah. Here we go. Good response. An unsound argument is invalid or has false premises or both. So it would seem that the vast majority of arguments are probably unsound. Either because they're invalid or they have false premises or both. A lot of the arguments that people give are unsound. For example, armor offers protection from attacks. If someone is protected from attacks, their body won't be damaged. Therefore, someone with armor on won't suffer damage to their body when they take attacks. You know this is false, right? Because you see in movies and you hear about all the time, like the guy in shining armor gets pierced with an arrow, right? And he dies. So something weird is going on here, right? Maybe the problem is with this premise. Armor doesn't necessarily protect you from all attacks. Yeah? Yeah. So, depending on what you think is going wrong here, you would say this is invalid, or it's one or more of its premises are false, or both. It depends on how we define these things exactly. That is a matter kind of for symbolic logic, the definitions of the words in our language. One of the ways that I could have run this class is I could have had you do a bunch of symbolic logic. But that takes a very mathematical mind, and I swear it's more boring than this. At least according to my own subjective opinion. So, sound is valid and true. Unsound is either invalid or has false premises or both. All of this is basically covered in the reading. I am just reiterating to you so that it sticks. We're going to be using this terminology when we talk about the wacky things these people are going to be saying in their books and articles. Okay? Although maybe you won't find them wacky. We'll see. One final thing that we care about when we're trying to be rational, when we're trying to be logical, when we're evaluating arguments is consistency. What does it mean for something to be consistent with another thing? Or how about for two sentences to be consistent? Two claims or statements to be consistent? Right. They can both be true at the same time. They don't contradict each other. They're not mutually exclusive. So we can define consistency as the statements that we're looking at can be true at the same time. They don't contradict one another. If they did contradict one another, they wouldn't be able to be true at the same time. So we want to offer consistent statements when we're giving arguments. And when we're evaluating arguments, we want to see, are their premises consistent? Are their premises consistent with the conclusion? Or are they contradicting themselves? For example, all of these could be true. Nerds watch anime, jocks watch anime, emo kids watch anime. Right? Could all these be true? Yeah, I didn't say all emo kids, right? Or all jocks. Yeah, these could all be true. I bet you'll find some emo kids who like One Punch Man, or probably Death Note. You'll probably find some jocks that like Dragon Ball Z, right? You'll probably find some nerds that like Mob Psycho, right? Or how about this? Can all of these be consistent? My hair is brown, her hair is blonde, his hair is red. Yeah, those all can all be consistent, right? But if I had said, my hair is brown, my hair is blonde, his hair is red, then no, right? Assuming my hair is, one color. Yada, yada. So, we want to evaluate arguments for consistency. Make sure our claims are consistent if we're going to support our ideas, our beliefs. So, what would mean for claims to be inconsistent? It's super easy, right? They contradict each other, exactly. One or more of them contradict each other. For example, nerds watch anime, jocks don't watch anime, only emo kids watch anime. Which two sentences contradict each other here? This is an inconsistent set of statements. 1 and 3? Exactly. Right? Because I said nerds watch anime, but then I contradicted myself with only emo kids watch anime, and that's not true. Because I'm not an emo kid anymore. And Saitama's there to punch anybody who gives inconsistent claims in their arguments. So don't play with inconsistency, okay? All right, is this making sense? You get all this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Does anybody have any questions? I know this is boring, but it's just stuff that we have to cover.
You can go back to the
Sure. For the first consistency slide?
we have one right before this.
This one?
Yeah. So, so how does generalization actually differ?
It depends if the generalization is true, right?
At least much room for error. Right?
Yeah. We want to try to be precise in our claims. I was just using easy examples.
Okay.
Yeah, if you generalize, you're at risk of overgeneralizing, which would be an error, right? So, this is why philosophers tend to use such technical language and precise language, is because they try to be very precise in what they're saying. That's why they invent all this terminology and use all this jargon. They're trying to be consistent and precise in what they say. Because the less precise you are, the more likely it is you're going to say something that's false, that somebody's going to misinterpret you, that you're going to say something you don't mean. For example, if I said, communists are bad, that's a very vague, general statement, right? You could interpret that in a lot of different ways. You could think I'm saying they're bad people. You could think I'm saying Leninists aren't good people. You could think I'm saying only the people that were running the former Soviet Union were bad people, right? There's a lot of room for interpretation there because the statement is general, it's not precise. Any other questions?
Not really a question, but
A thought? A concern?
but I trust my intuition, you know what I mean?
Sure.
You trust my intuition, or my decision-making is based off of my 30+ years of experience.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm right in this situation, but again, my intuition would tell me that I would be right, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I feel like I don't know that.
Yeah.
It wasn't mentioned in the slide, so I didn't know if that was a considered.
Intuition is a tricky thing to talk about. Soundness is a property of arguments. Now, your intuition could be true. You know? For example, you're walking home late at night after a banger party, okay? And you see somebody with a hood on following you, and you got a bad feeling in your gut, and you're like, I better get into a building right now. Your intuition might be right. Maybe they're trying to mug you. You know, maybe you don't think rationally about it. Your decision could still be the right one. You know, philosophers have had a lot to say about intuition, what it is, where it comes from, whether or not we should lean on it and trust it. I would personally say, like, yeah, trust your gut, even if it doesn't seem rational all the time. But the reason why it's a good thing to bring up is because it has to do with what I'm trying to get y'all to internalize and develop in this class. Hopefully by the end of class, you will have done this stuff and considered this stuff so much that your intuition will be sharp, such that you'll just naturally come to the proper conclusion without having to consciously think about it. That would be awesome. I don't expect that'll happen. It takes years of experience, life experience, and all that to develop a sharp intuition. Which is why we have to start by considering these things consciously and intentionally, and walking ourselves through the trains of logic, the considerations, all of that. Okay. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. I'll let you go then. I promise next lecture will be more interesting. It'll have a lot more pictures. I will be a lot funnier because we're looking at logical fallacies, which are fun to talk about. So do the reading for Tuesday, and we'll talk about logical fallacies, okay? All right. Thank you, folks.
Should we bring this for next class?
Yes.